All right. Our next speaker is John Constable with the Wellcome Sanger Institute, and his talk is titled Data, the Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the Informatics Digital Solutions team at Sanger. Its 5-year mission to migrate old data, to seek out new features, to boldly go where no iRODS zone has gone before.
Thank you, Guy. Hello, everybody. Right, so I've just established that people can hear me. And now I'm well aware right now that we're after lunch, second day of the conference, third day, but if you've been in the training, you know, we're all probably flagging a little bit. So I'm going to keep you in toes by asking a few questions. I would like some responses. So please do keep up. So first of all, this is basically what Corey just mentioned. A quick show of hand. Has anyone not heard of Star Trek? Okay, good. That would be really awkward if that's the case, because this talk wouldn't work if people weren't aware of Star Trek. Right. Okay, so it's going to be Star Trek themed, but not really, sort of. Anyway, so hello, as Corey said, I'm John Constable. I'm part of the Sanger's Informatics Digital Solutions team. I have to keep saying that because we changed our name in December last year, and I have to keep remembering what it is. The team that I'm in, within that is the informatics support group, which means that we're responsible for dealing with the scientists and maintaining the high performance compute infrastructure and the OpenStack local cloud. I've been working with iRODS since 2014, and I end up shaving a lot of yaks. If you don't know what that is, Google it, but after my talk, obviously. And Sanger, I'll let people click at the link there for what Sanger is if you don't know. Because we've been running iRODS for a while, and particularly in one of the zones, the largest zone we have holds the sequencing data that comes off all our many sequencers, Illumina, PacBio, Nanopore, and unless they've added something else since I've been away. I mean, the Prime Minister's left while I've been away, so who knows what's happened, right? So we've been running this for a while, a fair amount of data, and so we've got hundreds of servers that make up the different zones we've got. We've got 4 zones, I think, plus the development zones. We've got around 50 petabytes of data, depending on how you count it. You know, is 2 replicas count the data? Is it 1 copy? That kind of a thing. We're still on 427, and we're running Ubuntu 1804. So as you can see, we're move fast, break things kind of a place. So the first thing that we've been doing over the past year or so is moving data around. The problem with running your own data infrastructure and the servers that run it and stuff like that is that they become end of life, they go out of warranty, things like that, and you need to move that data off of those servers and put them onto a new set of servers or wherever it is you end up deciding. I won't go too much detail into this because we did a talk last year on the nuts and bolts of how we did it. But just to give people an idea of the kind of figures we're talking about, you can see that over the last 2 years, it's around 8 petabytes plus another 3.5 petabytes the year before that. And you can see the kind of number of resources that we're talking about. And each one of these needs a separate, basically, script and automation run on to drain that resource, take it out of the tree, put the new resource back into the tree, all those kinds of things. And I really want to shout out for my colleague Vijay here, who for the past 18 months that he's been with us, has, as well as other things he's been doing, not just this, has basically been babysitting these scripts to move all of this data. And we've migrated all of these servers and all of this data over the last few years with basically 0 effect on the end users. That means that we move between 2 completely different types of hardware without anybody basically being anything the wiser. And it's the second time we've done that kind of a large scale thing. The previous time was when we moved our entire replica, one replica of the servers, of the data rather, picked up the servers, put them on the lorry and drove them across to Slough. I know what deserved that, but anyway, we put them in a data center in Slough, and then we turned them back on again. And again, nobody noticed apart from people who are actually trying to write data to it. They knew there was going to be an outage. So this kind of a modularity and data virtualization for iRODS has been so helpful to us so many times. But having said that, we couldn't have done it without quite a lot of automation. I'm a okay, maybe-ish sort of scripter. I'm certainly not a developer, and I've been fortunate to work with people who are much better at that. And so we automated a chunk of this, and we couldn't really have done it without that. We couldn't have manually done the iFi moves or the iCopy or whatever over how many millions of objects there is. So we did this all. We wrote this script ourselves, and we've done this migration. But I want to know from the people on the room today, and perhaps people watching remotely, how many people would like a tool to migrate the data for them, say basically from this resource to that resource kind of thing? A show of hands. Okay. So that's sounds less than I thought. Okay, who wouldn't want that? Okay, who hasn't put their hand up? It's a trick question, guys. Come on. Okay, well, some of you. All right. So I'd be really interested for those of you that explicitly don't want it as to why that is actually. But if you catch them out later on, that'd be really interesting. So you might think, having looked at a lot of these, why don't we use the tiering plugin for it? Well, we could do. I could just about, so I would say, squinted it funny, and you could see how you could use it to do that. But that's a lot of specification. Sorry, a lot of engineering and moving parts for that. More so, I think, than the current thing we've got. Okay. So the other thing we did last year is we moved from Oracle to Postgres Sql. This isn't because we didn't like Oracle, but it's mostly because Oracle had a smaller number of people that are using it in the consortium, and Postgres was kind of everyone else. We wanted to move to something that had the widest set of test coverage and all that kind of a thing. And we're fortunate in that we have DBAs that speak all three of these. So we kind of went to them and said, which one would you rather support? And they kind of went, yeah, that one. So that's what we've moved to. And again, I get a quick show of hands for people here. So who's using Postgres as their backend database? It's about what? Half? Is that ish? Okay. Who's using Oracle? You might want to reconsider that because you're the only one now. Sorry. And who's using MySQL? That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Slight trick question. Who's using CockroachDB? That is supported. No. No, me neither. Okay. Is anyone using anything else? Yeah. Okay. Of course, there's cost savings for using. If you Postgres rather than Oracle, we don't have to pay the license for it. One thing that we found as we're moving this is quite how much metadata we're adding. I've got a slide on that a little bit later on. But when we started planning this, we had 300 million items of metadata. When we started to do the migration, we had 350, and now we've got 400 million items. That's over about a year, which is frankly insane. I've got a bit more to talk about that later. Switching over between the databases was surprisingly easy, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I mean, yeah, it required a lot of efforts, particularly for my DBAs, updating my configuration management, et cetera, et cetera. But if filter, there's very little tools to kind of do this is my database in Oracle. Is it the same database in Postgres? I mean, I know it's got the same data in it, but how would I verify one versus the other? It'd be quite nice if there are any kind of validation kind of tools for that, which there aren't at the moment. But we got around that by basically running our own unit tests, running our, this is what it looks like on Oracle, run the same thing on Postgres, that kind of a thing. And our DBAs ran these kinds of things loads of times to get a really good idea of how long this would take to migrate all the data. And quite frankly, the biggest amount of time was moving the data, was exporting it out of Oracle onto a file, shipping that file to the Postgres server, and then re-importing it back in again. And on an 800 gig database, that takes a while. Right at the end of that, I look at iAdmin every day, and towards the end of that, somebody said, "What about this RUM command?" Or what RUM command? I swear I'd never seen it. In the 8 years I've been using it, but the RUM, in case you're not familiar with it, is remove unused metadata. And we did a check, and that would have removed maybe 20% of the data, but we found out too late at that point. So I still haven't tried it. So if anyone has run it, and can you let me know, because we want to get to it, but we haven't had time yet. Okay, so the other thing that we've been doing is that we by default have two replicas on our zones. When somebody uploads a file, you get two replicas of that. It's stored in two different data center halls, if not two actual different data centers. So quick show of hands, how many people are using the tiering plugin? 1, 2, 3. Just 3? Okay, well, 4. So, yeah. Okay. So what we realized was that we've been storing the data, particularly in the seek zone, since 2010, earlier. And a lot of that data has actually been sent to the European Genome Archive, the EGA, at our sister organization, the EBI. So we thought, actually, why are we hanging on to this? And some of our scientists said, well, because we want to use it. And we kind of said, well, when have you touched it last? But anyway, it's a separate conversation. What we agreed, or rather what the scientists came to us is, you can drop down to 1 copy for the stuff that's been sent to the EGA. So what we've then got is we use the tiering plugin to organize that. We've got 2 composite trees, one for normal data, the root tree, that kind of thing, and then we've got one for no replicas, and we want to move all the stuff that's been moved to the EGA back over to the no repository. We want to do this all by metadata, completely automated approach. We run a query that says what data has been tagged to the EGA, what data has been moved, that kind of a thing, and then tag it with stuff we need to do. And in theory, what we want to do is all these things. We've got a backlog now. Just go do it. Tell me when you're done, kind of thing. Or even don't even bother telling me when you're done. Now, it's really important, of course, that we move the right data. And yet my entire presentation was to get this pun in. So sorry. The problems we found with the tiering plugin was that by default, when you go to the GitHub pages for the plugins, they are the latest version of whatever's been checked in. They're the master or main branch or whatever. And it's not always obvious that this changes over time. So as we're running 4.2.7, the documentation was slightly different. In fact, the configuration was slightly different for different kind of versions. So that tripped us up a couple of times. Also, the default for the tiering plugin as written is that it's time-based. The initial assumption for it was that people wanted to do this based on age. Once the data's half an hour old or 20 seconds, whatever, it gets moved to different tiers. But that's not what we want to do. We want it purely metadata-based. So that kind of tripped us up a bit, or tripped the plugin up, because we had to basically make sure that each item of metadata had the time tag that it was expecting. And anything new that comes in gets tagged automatically by the plugins. But anything old, which is all of our data, basically needs tagging. So that means we need 2 items of metadata being tagged to 1, which is double the work, effectively. Also, the thing that we found was that 4.2.7, unlike 4.2.8, doesn't actually obey one of the server config settings to limit the number of delay rule processes that run at any one time. So basically, if we give it 100 things to do, we go, woohoo, 100 things, and off it goes. And actually, that's not what we wanted. We kind of wanted it to throttle it a bit so that it doesn't do all of the things all at once, particularly if we put on something like 100,000, 200,000 objects. We don't want all of those to be migrated at the same time. So we had to, at the moment, what we're having to do is a bit fragile solution of basically watching the queue. How big is the queue? Is it got small enough? Okay, fine, we'll put some more things in, which isn't really where we wanted to go with it. But once we get through past the backlog, maybe that's okay. I'm getting some pushback internally on that. The other thing we found was that every time the rule engine plugin runs and it generates a list of stuff, or the rule on the rule engine runs and generates a list of stuff, it keeps that connection to the database open until it's run through all of its items. Now, because we don't always finish those things within a half an hour, this means that you build up a number of connections on the database. And it's actually a known bug on, again, 4.2.7 with the rule engine plugin. And it made our poor DBAs quite alarmed, because they saw we suddenly went up to like 1,000 connections, and then 1,500, 2,000. They're like, oh, that's steady on now. So we had to do a fair amount of what do you call it, managing of this kind of thing around that. Now, actually, we can handle a lot more than those number of connections, but it's still being aware that there is a limit for it. Also, the only way to find out what the plugin is doing, I think, to get a report of what's been moved in the log, is to turn on log notice. But when you turn on log notice, you get a lot of stuff in the log, including stuff that says, I don't actually have all the metadata I need yet, I'll try again later. And that makes the log almost unusable at the moment. So in general, we've really got to upgrade for 4.2.11, but doing that is fairly non-trivial for us. We need to get a number of groups involved, plan it out, that kind of stuff. We can't just kind of do apt-get upgrade, off we go. But the plus side, side benefit of doing this work is that now with the audit, the access time plugin, any data that goes into iRODS gets tagged with a metadata thing that says when it was accessed. And anytime somebody downloads it or puts a new version on, that tag gets updated. So now we have a way to say, look at all this data, look at all the stuff you haven't touched. Which will lead to some interesting conversations with our scientific colleagues. And, I know you said you wanted all of this, but you've never done anything with it. Where that goes, I don't know, but we now got the tools to do it. This is an example of a dashboard that we stuck together when we were watching all of this. And you can see, no prizes for guessing when we tagged in a whole load of objects to get work done. This is a very pleasing graph of it kind of going down over time as it works through the rules. Unfortunately, with the axes, you can't clearly see the number of database connections that kind of go whoop and stay up around the 1,000, 2,000 kind of thing. And then we've also got the indexing plugin in there as well. We did also come up with this natural dashboard. I say we, I mean my colleague Dave did all the hard work here. And again, this is an internal view from a couple of days ago. We showed the amount of data that we've moved, the number of objects, and also how much money we're saving by moving from 2 copies down to 1 copy. So we only have to have half the amount of storage. So talking about lots of items of metadata, searching this is getting increasingly tricky. We've got the database that at the moment doesn't fit in memory on the database server that's running it. And so any queries that need to do a full table scan, good luck with how long that's going to take. It can go fast, it can go slow. And as I mentioned, we're adding metadata really fast. And that rate is going up. And this is despite the team that put a lot of this data in, switching to put the data. So for example, if they upload a collection with a whole load of files in it, if all of those files have the same metadata, they've taken to putting that metadata on the collection rather than on the individual files. So you get an order of magnitude less metadata. But even with that, we're still getting huge amounts of metadata. So, I'm not sure where this is going long term, but it's certainly something we need to keep an eye on. With Oracle, you could pin a query, and they have a way that it calculates which order to do the lookups in and that kind of a thing. In Oracle, you can pin ones to make sure it does the most efficient way. In Postgres, you can't. And we were particularly worried that this would mean that the things would go all over the place in terms of how long these orders take. And that's partially true. So the workaround around this is to use the indexing plugin, which, if people aren't familiar, is basically takes all the metadata in a zone and puts it into Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is designed to handle into this kind of thing, natural language searching, far more friendly interface for our users. Great, this is what we want to do. There is a bit of a problem with it, however, we can't actually get it to work on this size database. The smaller zones, yeah, sure, they're running fine, the data's going in fine. But at the moment, it's trying to ingest these 400 million items, and it can't even get itself off the state. It's actually, as you can see, running the thing out of memory. The other thing is that while the Elasticsearch is a great idea, the Kibana interface is much better for natural language. We as end users, sysadmins, developers, bioinformaticians are used to doing a curl command and all those kinds of things, but our end users mostly are not going to want to do that. We did try to get around this by writing a command line tool called Meta, which queries Elasticsearch before querying iRODS. That gets around the performance things, but it's still not a great solution to this. So we're still thinking about how we want to best do that. And again, show of hands, please. How many people are using the indexing plugin? 2, 3. Okay. And just as an example, this is a dashboard from a day or so ago showing the number of different things in the ELK index for the sequencing zone. And this should read obviously in the hundreds of millions for document count, things like that, but isn't yet at the moment. This is one of the ways we keep an eye on, is it actually changing? Is there anything actually going in at all? And it is changing slowly, but that's basically the metadata on new items that are coming in that are being put in, as far as I can tell. And if people haven't seen it, this is the kind of thing you can see in ELK, just for the kind of data you can get out of it. It's actually friendlier than that from a user point of view. You can put the search, your metadata search turns in at the top, and it brings all the list of stuff back. You can then limit it by these kinds of things. Okay. We also deployed, because clearly we haven't got enough plugins yet, we deployed NFS-RODS. And the use case for this was a particular group who have their own zone, and they wanted their users, after having migrated their data in from Lustre into iRODS, to A, see it's there and be able to interact with it on the file system that they were used to, but B, run genome browse directly on it, and genome browse needs to talk to a file system, so they needed a way to have a file system view of the iRODS data. So we did that following mostly the instructions, but what we put together was a VM that has an iRODS provider on it and the NFS VODs in a Docker container. And then we can scale that. So at the moment we've only got one of them, but if they all of a sudden they want to point their farm at it, then we can scale up 10, 20, 30, 40 of these, because they're all individual kind of things, do some kind of round robin around them. That's the theory. We haven't actually done and tried that yet, but it's certainly we started this model because having them all on different servers, the latency between them going from the client to the NFS VODs instance, to the provider, to the database, there were too many hops and everything slowed down. And we've done this within Federation. And what that means is that most of our users come in, say, John hash federated user ID, they come on that. But NFS VODs only looks at the local user. So John at local user, local zone is actually the ID that NFS VODs maps to. So that means we need to make sure that now there are two sets of users always created every time people need to access that, and any ACLs get set to both. So that's a fair amount of kind of administration that we, or indeed the other team that manage this, need to do for it. And when we first deployed NFS VODs, this was, gosh, do you remember what version it was originally? It was 4 or 5 versions back at least.
Probably, I can't remember the version.
We found there was a lot of performance issues with it. Not only is it single threaded in terms of data transfer, but it does lots and lots of stat calls, and that came back and forth to the server and then to the database and on and on. And so everything went really, really slow. We had differences of running an LS on an NFS VODs file system versus local file system, was like the difference was like 2 minutes or something like that. That was basically unusable, especially for the casual browsing they wanted to use it for. Then a lot of that got fixed, and now we're at the point where if you actually want to load the data up, if it's a large file, it's going to be slow because that data is single threaded. As you saw yesterday, NFS VODs now could do can do parallel transfer, and so hopefully that is faster. We haven't upgraded to that version yet, so hopefully. So hands up, who's using NFS VODs? No one. No one. One person maybe-ish, sort of. Yeah. I swear that somebody did talk yesterday using. Are we the only one using NFS VODs? Really? Okay. Okay. I had to put this there. So Americans, British, data sounds differently. For some reason, the character in Star Trek's called data, not data. I've never understood it. But anyway, so we migrate, as always, we're adding more data in, and we add at least 1 to 2 to 3 petabytes of storage a year. This is an example of one of our dashboards showing the amount of capacity for each of our trees. We have a green tree and a red tree. Green tree is in one side of the center, red one is in the other, so it's where the 2 replicas stand. And we have a terrible thing of estimation of when this is going to fill up. And I say it's terrible because it's just a straight linear regression, which anybody who knows any math at this point is going, oh God, no, why are you doing that? And it's the simplest thing that we could do at the time. We're looking at other options, never quite had the round to it to get to it. But it's the kind of dashboard that we do. And in fact, I might be doing a lightning talk later on where I'd be really interested in how people administer their zones and what the kind of best practices are. What kind of things should we as iRODS administrators be keeping an eye on, and all those kinds of things. Because I think we all look at slightly different things. I expect there's some areas that are going to be quite common to all of us. So we use DDN, recently Supermicro and Dell servers, but I don't know if other people have found this. We're finding supply issues really hard at the moment. It's a year backlog for switches, 3 to 6 months for servers, optics all over the place. So we're having to keep stuff that, we know I mentioned we drained all that data. We're now having to keep the servers around and maybe put them back into production again. And that's it. So thank you all for bearing with me. There's 2 QR codes up there. One of them is to my LinkedIn. The other one isn't. So good luck. And the other mention is that I do run a newsletter I do once a month for developments in iRODS and that kind of a thing. If people want to have a look at that, it's kind of more on the technical side, as in these are all the issues that have been raised, that kind of stuff, if people are interested. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, John. Awesome.